Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel to a place where social distancing wasn't a health measure. It was a job description. We are heading back to the late 19th century, to the wildest edges of the British Isles. We aren't going to a castle or a manor house. We're going to stone needles sticking out of the wildest ocean on Earth. You are going to be a lighthouse keeper. It sounds romantic, right? Reading books by a cozy fire while the storm rages outside? Well, maybe. But there's also the smell of burning oil, the constant dampness, and the realization that your roommate hasn't said a word to you in 3 weeks. You might not survive the first day, let alone the 6-week shift, but we're going to try. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel stay bright in the algorithmic fog. Also, drop a comment down below and let me know what city you are watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing where you all are drifting in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the deck of the Lighthouse tender, a sturdy, stubborn little steamship that smells of coal smoke and wet rope. The year is 1891. You are wearing a uniform that is made of wool so thick and scratchy it feels like you are wearing a carpet. It is stiff, heavy, and smells faintly of sheep, but you are grateful for it because the wind out here cuts like a knife. You are currently bobbing in the North Sea, or maybe the Atlantic off the coast of Cornwall. The horizon is a flat, gray line that keeps tilting violently from left to right. You are gripping the railing with white knuckles because you are about to do the most dangerous part of your new job, the commute. Ahead of you, rising directly out of the water, is your new home. It doesn't look like a house. It looks like a tree trunk made of granite. It is a tapered cylinder, gray and white, standing alone in a chaos of white water. There is no island. There is no beach. There is just a jagged reef that is currently being hammered by waves, and bolted onto that reef is a tower. This is a wave-swept tower. Here is a mainstream historical fact for you. Most of the famous rock lighthouses in Britain, like the Bell Rock or Scaravore, were built by one family, the Stevensons. If that name sounds familiar, it's because one of the family members, Robert Louis Stevenson, decided he hated engineering and went off to write Treasure Island instead. His father was furious. He wanted Robert to build lighthouses, not pirate stories. But looking at this tower, you can see why Robert quit. Building this thing required men to work on a rock that was underwater for 20 hours a day. It is a miracle of engineering, standing defiant against the ocean for decades. The captain of the tender shouts something unintelligible through a brass megaphone. The ship cannot get close to the rock. If it did, the swell would smash the hull against the granite reefs. So they lower a small rowboat, you and your sea bag, containing your pipe, your tobacco, a Bible, and 2 changes of underwear, are unceremoniously dumped into it. 2 sailors row you toward the tower. The waves lift the small boat up 10 feet, then drop it down into a trough, so deep you can't see the horizon. You are getting closer to the rock. You can see the seaweed clinging to the base, looking like slimy green hair. There is no door at the bottom. The entrance is 30 feet up the side of the tower, reached by a ladder of bronze rungs bolted into the stone. "Wait for the rise," one of the sailors yells. This is the ritual of your arrival. You have to stand up in a rocking boat, grab the slimy ladder as the wave lifts you up, and climb like a monkey before the boat drops away beneath you. If you miss, you fall into the churning white water between the boat and the rock. That is usually fatal. You time it. The water swells. The boat rises. You lunge. Your hands grip the cold, wet bronze. You scramble up, feet slipping on the seaweed. You don't look down. You climb until you reach the heavy copper door, set deep into the stone wall. A hand reaches out and hauls you inside. You're late? A voice grumbles. This is the principal keeper. Let's call him Mr. McGinty. He is a man shaped like a barrel, with a beard that looks like steel wool and skin weathered to the texture of old leather. He has been on this rock for 2 months. He hasn't seen a new face since spring. He doesn't say hello or welcome. He just looks at your boots to make sure you aren't tracking salt onto his floor. You step inside. The door slams shut behind you with a sound like a bank vault closing. Clang. Then the heavy iron bolts are thrown. Thud, thud. The sound of the ocean is instantly muffled. It changes from a roar to a dull, vibrating hum that resonates through the soles of your feet. You are inside the stone bottle. Here is an obscure little fact about lighthouse life. If the weather was too rough for the boat to get close enough for you to jump, they would use something called the breeches buoy. It was essentially a pair of canvas pants sewn into a life preserver, hanging from a rope line strung between the ship and the tower. They would stick you in the pants and drag you through the waves like a sack of laundry. It was undignified, wet, and terrified grown men more than the ghost stories. You should be thankful you got to use a ladder. You are standing in the entrance room. It is the bottom level of the tower. It is damp. It smells of three distinct things: paraffin oil, which is a fuel for the light, polished brass, and old, unwashed wool. This smell will be your entire universe for the next 6 weeks. The room is circular, obviously. The walls are thick, about 6 feet of solid granite at this level. You feel like you are standing inside the throat of a dinosaur. There are water tanks here and coal bunkers. Everything is curved to fit the wall. There are no corners. You will soon realize that living without corners does something strange to your spatial perception. You feel exposed, yet trapped. Mr. McGinty is already climbing the spiral stairs. "Stow your gear," he calls down. "Then come up. The lens needs polishing." You drop your bag. You walk over to a small, thick window, more like a porthole, and look out. The tender ship is already turning away. It blasts its steam whistle, a lonely, white plume of sound that gets ripped away by the wind. You watch it churn through the gray water, heading back to the mainland, back to pubs and horses and trees and people who don't smell like paraffin. A sudden, sinking feeling hits your stomach. It isn't seasickness. It is the realization of total commitment. There is no phone. There is no radio. It's 1891. Marconi hasn't saved the world yet. If you have a heart attack, if you go crazy, or if you just realize you forgot your toothbrush, there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. That ship isn't coming back for a month. This brings us to a topic that historians and engineers still argue about: the foundation paradox. You see, sticking a lighthouse on a rock seems like a good idea. But some engineers argue that by carving into the rock to create a flat foundation, you actually weaken the very thing you are trying to build on. There's a debate about whether the rock would have lasted longer if we had just left it alone. Did we save ships by building the light? Or did we doom the rock to eventually crumble into the sea faster than nature intended? It's a classic case of humans trying to conquer nature and maybe accidentally sabotaging it. Standing here, feeling the floor vibrate as a massive wave hits the base, you really hope the engineers who said it's fine were right. The ship disappears over the horizon. You are now a speck on a map. You are the exclamation point at the end of the world. You turn away from the window. The spiral staircase waits. It twists upward into the gloom, a spine of iron and stone. You take a deep breath of the oily air, put your hand on the cold railing, and begin to climb. The shift has begun. You are climbing. This is the first lesson of lighthouse life. Everything is vertical. In a normal house, you walk from the kitchen to the bedroom. Here you climb. Your life is a series of spiral movements around a central stone spine. Your thighs are going to burn for the first week, and by the time you leave, you will have the legs of a Tour de France cyclist. The staircase is a marvel of masonry. The steps are cut directly into the outer wall, cantilevered inward. There is no central pillar, just a dizzying drop down the middle if you were to lean over the rail. The walls are painted a clinical, institutional gloss white to reflect the meager light, but you can feel the thousands of tons of granite pressing in behind the paint. You reach the first habitable level above the entrance, the oil room. If the lighthouse is a living organism, this is its stomach. The room is lined with large copper cisterns. The air here is thick with a smell that is sweet, chemical, and slightly nauseating. This is paraffin. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Before the mid-19th century, lighthouses burned sperm whale oil. It gave a beautiful, bright, smokeless flame. But as whales were hunted to the brink of extinction and the price skyrocketed, Trinity House, the authority that runs British lighthouses, had to switch. They tried vegetable oil, colza. pressed from wild cabbage, which smelled like cooking dinner, but eventually settled on paraffin kerosene. It was cheap, efficient, and volatile. You look at the cans. Each one weighs about 5 gallons. Part of your job. The part they don't put on the recruitment poster is hand pumping this oil from the basement tanks into these cans, and then lugging them up the stairs to the lantern room at the very top. It is a daily, back-breaking ritual of feeding the beast. If you spill a drop, you scrub it up instantly. Oil stains on the floor are a firing offense. You keep climbing. The next level up is the storeroom. This is your pantry, but it looks more like a ship's hold. There are barrels of flour, tins of salted beef, sacks of potatoes, and crates of hard-tack biscuits that are dense enough to be used as building materials. There is number 7-Eleven down the street. If you run out of tea, you are out of tea for a month. If the potatoes go rotten, which they will in the damp air, you eat rice. You realize the logistics of this place are terrifying. Every single object in this room, every biscuit, every nail, every match, had to be rowed out in a small boat, hauled up a rope ladder, and carried up these stairs. It gives you a newfound respect for a simple sack of onions. Up another flight. You are panting now. You reach the bedroom. This is where the reality of the architecture hits you. The room is circular, about 14 feet in diameter. There are bunks built into the curvature of the wall. They aren't rectangular, they are slightly curved. You are literally sleeping in a banana shape. There are 3 bunks, stacked like shelves in a cupboard. Since there are usually 3 keepers on station, you might think you each get one, but often the rotation means one man is on watch, one is doing maintenance, and one is sleeping. The bed is hot bunked. Sometimes you slide into a mattress that is still warm from the guy who just woke up. It is intimate, painfully intimate. Here is an obscure little fact about Lighthouse furniture. Because of the curved walls, you can't just buy a dresser from a shop. Everything has to be bespoke. The cupboards, the desks, even the picture frames are often curved to sit flush against the granite. You are living inside a piece of custom cabinetry. And check under the mattress. You might find a layer of newspaper. Keepers use it for insulation against the cold stone, but also for reading material. You might be sleeping on headlines from the Crimean War. The privacy here is non-existent. The only place you can be alone is inside your own head. Or, surprisingly, inside your bunk curtains. Each bunk has heavy velvet curtains. When you draw them, that tiny coffin-sized space is the only territory on Earth that is exclusively yours. You will learn to love that curtain more than any door you have ever owned. One more flight up. The kitchen, or the living room, depending on the time of day. This is the heart of the tower. It is the only room that is truly warm, thanks to the cast iron coal stove bolted to the floor. The stove is named the Queen or the Dover, and it is the altar you will worship at. It cooks your food, boils your water for tea, dries your perpetually wet socks, and keeps you from freezing to death. The smoke pipe from the stove goes straight up through the ceiling, passing through the rooms above to heat them before exiting the roof. It is a primitive central heating system. You sit down on a curved wooden bench. Mr. McGinney is already there, peeling a potato with a knife that looks like a shank. Tea, he grunts. You nod. He pours a cup of sludge that is black as tar and sweet as syrup. This is Lighthouse tea. It is brewed continuously. The leaves never fully change, just topped up. It has enough caffeine to jumpstart a corpse. As you sip the tea, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, you notice a sound, or rather the lack of it. Down in the entrance, the ocean was a roar. Here, 60 feet up, the stone walls are thinner, but the sound is different. It is the wind. It whistles around the cylinder. Because the tower is round, the wind splits and wraps around it, creating a constant, high-pitched keening sound, like a flute being played by a giant. It never stops. After 3 days, you won't hear anymore. After 3 weeks, if it stops, you will wake up in a panic, because silence means the weather has changed. This environment leads us to a significant academic debate among maritime historians and psychologists, the social experiment of the Lighthouse. For decades, the Trinity House and the Northern Lighthouse Board ran these towers with strict military discipline. Keepers wore uniforms, stood inspections, and followed rigid timetables. Some historians argue that this strict structure saved the men's minds. The ritual of polishing brass and logging weather gave them a purpose in the void. It kept chaos at bay. But modern psychologists and some revisionist historians argue the opposite. They claim that the rigid discipline, combined with the isolation, actually accelerated mental breakdowns. They point to the high rates of alcoholism, often hidden, and the petty feuds that turned into violent hatreds. Was the uniform a shield against the madness, or was it a straitjacket that made the pressure worse? Sitting across from McGinty, who is staring at his potato with intense, silent concentration, you can see both sides. The routine keeps you moving, but the repression feels heavy. You want to ask him about his life, his family, anything, but the code of the tower seems to be silence. You talk about the light, the oil, the weather. Feelings are left on the shore. You finish your tea. The cup clinks against the saucer. Right. McGinty says, standing up, top floor. The lantern, don't look down. You stand up. The ceiling here is low. You feel the weight of the stone above you. You are living in a chimney, a stone lung breathing for the ocean. You head for the stairs again. The final climb. The reason you are here. Above you is the crown jewel of Victorian engineering. A machine so beautiful and so dangerous that it requires a bath of mercury to operate. You grip the rail. Your legs ache, but you climb. You leave the warm, potato-scented comfort of the kitchen and head back to the stairs. The air gets cooler as you climb. You are reaching the summit of the Stone Needle. You arrive at the service room. This is the last stop before the top. It is the backstage area of the theater. The walls here are lined with spare panes of heavy glass, specialized tools that look like dentist instruments for giants, and enough brass polish to shine the moon. Mr. McGinty points to a rag and a tin of spirits of wine, high-proof alcohol. Wash your hands, he orders, then wash them again. You don't touch the crown jewels with greasy fingers. You climb the final short ladder. It is made of cast iron and is steep, almost vertical. You push open a small floor hatch, and your head pops up into the lantern room. If the kitchen was a heart, this is the brain, and it is breathtaking. For the first time since you entered the tower, you aren't surrounded by stone. You are surrounded by glass. The walls are a geometric grid of diamond-shaped window panes, framed in diagonal bronze bars called astragals. The view is 360 degrees of pure, unadulterated Atlantic Ocean. The sun is beginning to set, painting the water in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. You feel incredibly exposed. You are 100 feet up, inside a glass bubble, with nothing but the curvature of the earth around you. But you aren't looking at the view. You are looking at it. Dominating the center of the room is the optic, the lens. It is absolutely massive. It stands about 12 feet tall and weighs roughly 4 tons. It doesn't look like a magnifying glass. It looks like a transparent beehive made of crystal rings, or perhaps a steampunk disco ball designed by a mathematician. This is a first-order Fresnel lens. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Before 1822, lighthouses were terrible. They used metal mirrors to reflect the light of coal fires or candles. They were dim, smoky, and useless in thick fog. Then came a French physicist named Augustin-Jean Fresnel, pronounced Fresnel. He realized that a solid glass lens big enough to capture the light would be too heavy and thick. It would crack under its own weight and absorb too much light. So, he did something brilliant. He collapsed the lens. He chopped it up into concentric rings of prisms. Each prism is cut at a slightly different angle, doing the same job as a continuous curve but with a fraction of the glass. It was the invention of the step lens. It changed maritime history overnight. You step closer to it. It is hypnotic. You can see your own reflection fractured into 1,000 slices in the prisms. McGinty hands you the rag. The glazing, he says. Inside and out, no streaks. You start cleaning the glass of the lantern room. It is terrifying. You are standing on a narrow metal grating, wiping the glass that separates you from a drop that would end your career very suddenly. As you clean, you look back at the lens. It is a hyper-radiant optic, the largest size ever made. It is a masterpiece of Victorian precision. This brings us an obscure industrial fact. These lenses were not cast in molds. They were ground by hand. Every single one of those hundreds of prisms was polished by a man in a factory, usually Chance Brothers in Birmingham or Barbier in Paris, until it was optically perfect. The tolerance was measured in fractions of a millimeter. The cost of this single glass structure in 1891 money was equivalent to millions of dollars today. You are essentially acting as a janitor for the most expensive object you will ever touch. The purpose of this glass monster is simple but magical. It takes the light from the lamp, which is actually quite small, maybe the size of a grapefruit, and captures every stray photon. It grabs the light that would uselessly hit the ceiling or the floor and bends it. It forces all that light into a single horizontal sheet. It turns a sphere of light into a pancake of light. That pancake is so concentrated that, from 20 miles away, it doesn't look like a lamp. It looks like a supernova hovering on the horizon. But wait, how does it flash? The flame doesn't blink. The lens rotates. The giant glass beehive spins around the flame. Some panels are bullseyes, magnifiers, and some are dark sectors. As it spins, the bullseye sweeps past the ship, creating a bright flash. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. This leads to a fascinating academic debate that raged in the 19th century, the flash duration controversy. On one side were the scientists, like Lord Kelvin, yes, the temperature guy. They argued for short, intense flashes. They said a millisecond burst of ultra-bright light was enough to catch the eye, and it saved fuel. They wanted lighthouses to look like strobe lights. On the other side were the old sea captains. They hated the short flash. They argued that in a storm, when you're being tossed around on a bridge and rain is lashing your eyes, a split-second flash is easy to miss. They wanted a long dwell, a flash that lasted 3 or 4 seconds, so they could take a bearing on it. It was a battle between efficiency and psychology. The scientists had the math. The sailors had the fear. Eventually, a compromise was reached, but for a long time, the lightning flash lights were hated by the very people they were supposed to save. McGinney taps his pocket watch. Sundown, he announces. Light up. This is the moment, the ritual. You open the small brass door at the base of the lens. You crawl inside the glass structure. You are now inside the beehive. The prisms distort the world outside into a swirl of rainbows. In the center is the burner. It's a specialized paraffin vapor lamp. You use a small spirit torch to preheat the vaporizer tubes. You wait until they hiss. Then you open the valve. The paraffin hits the hot tubes, turns into gas, and rushes into mantle, a delicate mesh bag made of silk and rare earth salts, thorium and cerium. You strike a match. You touch it to the mantle. Pop, a brilliant, blinding white light explodes into existence. It is instantly hot. The temperature inside the lens spikes. You scramble backward, closing the brass door to protect your eyes. But the job isn't done. A lighthouse that doesn't move is just a street lamp. You need to wake the giant. McGinney points to a heavy iron crank handle on the wall. Wind it, he says. You grab the handle. It resists. You put your back into it. Click-clack, click-clack. You are winding a massive clockwork weight that hangs down the center of the tower, all the way to the bottom. This weight drives the gears that spin the 4-ton lens. You wind until your arms burn. Then McGinney releases a brake. Slowly, silently, the massive glass cathedral begins to turn. It is eerie. Something that heavy shouldn't move that smoothly. It floats. The beams of light start to sweep around the room, hitting the glass walls, cutting through the twilight. Sweep, sweep. You step out onto the balcony, the gallery, for a breath of fresh air. The wind hits you hard. You look up. Above your head, the great beams of light are rotating, stabbing out into the darkening ocean like solid bars of white gold. They stretch out for miles, touching the waves, searching for ships. You feel a strange surge of power. You are doing this. You are the reason the ships won't crash tonight. You are the keeper of the fire. But then you wonder, how does a 4-ton glass sculpture spin so smoothly that it doesn't vibrate the lamp? Ball bearings would grind down. Wheels would create friction. McGinty joins you on the balcony, lighting his pipe. She floats, he says, patting the wall of the lantern, on a bed of poison. He's not speaking metaphorically. You're standing in the lantern room, watching the 4-ton glass beehive rotate. It is mesmerizing, not just because of the light, but because of the sound. There isn't any. Think about it. You have a massive iron and glass structure, weighing as much as 2 elephants, spinning at a decent speed. If this were a carriage or a mill, it would be grinding, squeaking, and vibrating the fillings out of your teeth. But this, it glides. It spins with the kind of frictionless perfection that makes you want to reach out and touch it. Please don't. Give it a push, McGinney says, nodding at the brass handle on the side of the lens frame. You hesitate. It looks immovable, but you place one finger, just one, against the brass and push gently. The entire 4-ton structure accelerates. It moves as easily as a toy boat in a bathtub. How, you ask? McGinty points to the base of the lens. There's a cast iron trough running in a circle underneath the optic. It looks like a donut-shaped gutter. You peer inside. It isn't filled with grease. It isn't filled with ball bearings. It is filled with a thick, silvery, trembling liquid. Quicksilver, McGinney grunts. She doesn't roll. She floats. You are looking at a mercury bath. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Before the 1890s, big lenses rolled on steel chariot wheels or conical rollers. The problem was friction. They were heavy. They wore out the tracks, and they required a massive clockwork engine to turn. But then, French engineers perfected the bain de mercure, because mercury is a metal that is liquid at room temperature, and it is incredibly dense, 13.5 times denser than water. Iron actually floats on it like a cork. So, the entire multi-ton optical apparatus is literally floating on a pool of toxic metal. There's almost zero friction. It is an engineering miracle. It allows a tiny clockwork weight to spin a massive light with almost no energy. But you might be thinking, isn't mercury incredibly poisonous? Yes, it is. And you are standing in a small, enclosed, hot glass room with about 500 pounds of stuff sloshing around in an open trough. McGinney hands you a tool that looks like a ladle. Skim it, he orders. Dust settles on the surface. Creates drag. This is your new morning routine. You have to lean over the trough, breathing in the warm, metallic air, and gently skim the gray skin of dust and oxidized gunk off the surface of the mercury. This brings us to a terrifyingly obscure maintenance fact. The mercury gets dirty. Sometimes, skimming isn't enough. Occasionally, you have to drain the entire bath. You have to filter gallons of liquid mercury through a piece of chamois leather, squeezing it like a toxic udder to catch the impurities. Before pouring it back in, you do this with your bare hands, because rubber gloves haven't really caught on yet. As you stare at the shimmering liquid death, you realize why lighthouse keepers have a reputation for being eccentric. You've heard of the phrase, mad as a hatter, right? Hat makers use mercury to cure felt, and the fumes slowly destroyed their brains. The symptoms include tremors, extreme shyness, mood swings, and hallucinations. This leads to a fascinating medical and historical debate, the keeper's madness argument. For a century, stories of lighthouse keepers going insane were blamed on the isolation, the silence, the wind, the repetitive routine. Everyone assumed it was cabin fever or calenture. But modern toxicologists looking back at the records argue that many of these men were likely suffering from chronic mercury poisoning erotism. The aggression, the paranoia, the seeing ghosts, those are textbook symptoms of inhaling mercury vapor in a hot, unventilated lantern room for 30 years. So, when you hear a story about a keeper jumping into the sea because the voices told him to, there's a strong chance the voices were brought to you by the periodic table of elements. McGinty watches you skimming the trough. He seems fine, mostly, although you notice his hand shakes slightly when he lights his pipe, and he just talks to the seagulls. But that's normal, right? Don't splash, he warns. If it gets into the floorboards, we'll never get out. You move with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. The liquid is heavy. It feels alien against the ladle. It moves with a strange, sluggish momentum. The heat from the lamp is building up in the room. The mercury is getting warm. You try to hold your breath when you are close to it, but you have to breathe eventually. You are inhaling the very thing that makes the lighthouse work. It's a symbiotic relationship. The light saves the ships, and the keeper pays for it with his nervous system. You finish skimming. The surface of the Mercury is now a perfect, mirror-like silver ring. The lens rotates even smoother than before. Good, McGinney says. Now, check the weights. We have to wind her every 45 minutes. You step back from the trough, wiping your hands on your wool trousers. Bad idea, but instinct. You look out the glass. The beams are sweeping the dark ocean. Flash, dark, flash, dark. It is beautiful. It is a masterpiece of Victorian technology, a perfect marriage of optics, mechanics, and chemistry. It is also a toxic trap floating in the sky. You realize that the danger out here isn't just the waves crashing against the tower base, or the wind trying to blow the glass out. The danger is right here in the room with you, shimmering in a cast iron gutter, silently spinning the light while it slowly rewires your brain. Time for tea, McGinney says, heading for the hatch. You follow him down, away from the Mercury, back to the safe zone where only the coal fumes and paraffin smoke can get you. You look at your hands. They look steady. For now, we are still in the lantern room, but the romance of the spinning glass has faded slightly. Now, you are faced with the reality of the job. You are sitting on a small wooden stool, staring into the blinding heart of the lens. Your eyes are watering. The heat is oppressive. You are sweating into your wool uniform, but you can't wipe your forehead because your hands are covered in oil. You are performing the most delicate surgery on Earth, tending the wick, while later lighthouses used incandescent vapor, like a super bright camping lantern. In 1891, many major lights still relied on the argan burner. Imagine a candle. Now, imagine 6 or 8 concentric circular wicks, one inside the other, creating a solid cylinder of fire. It is a beast. It drinks oil like a thirsty sailor, and it has a temper. Your job is to keep that flame at exactly, and I mean exactly, 4 inches high. If the flame drops to 3 inches, the light falls below the focal plane of the lens. That means the beam dips. Instead of shining 20 miles out to sea to warn the ships, you are illuminating the fish about 500 yards offshore. The captain of a steamer looking for your light will see nothing but darkness until he hits the rocks. But if the flame rises to 4.5 inches, that is a nightmare. If the flame gets too high, it starts to smoke. In a normal house, a smoking lamp means a dirty ceiling. Inside a first-order Fresnel lens, a smoking lamp is a catastrophe. The soot rises instantly. It coats the inside of the priceless glass prisms. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Soot is black. Black absorbs heat. If a spot of soot lands on the crystal glass and the intense heat of the lamp hits it, that spot will superheat instantly. The glass will crack. We are talking about shattering a prism that costs more than you will earn in your entire lifetime. So, you watch the flame. You stare at it until you see sunspots in your vision. And then you see it. A fork. A tiny piece of carbon has formed on one of the wicks. It's called a thief or a mushroom. It splits the flame, making it jagged. It's about to smoke. You grab your tool. It isn't a pair of scissors. It looks more like a weird medical instrument, a long pair of forceps with a flat, circular cutting head. You have to open the little service door of the lens. The heat hits you in the face like a physical punch. You have to reach inside the burning lamp. You can't turn it off. You can't dim it. You have to perform surgery on a live fire. You carefully maneuver the trimmer. You have to snip off that tiny crumb of carbon without crushing the soft cotton wick and without extinguishing the flame. If you sneeze, you put the light out. If your hand shakes, you drop the burning carbon into the oil well and start a fire. Snip! You pull your hand out. You close the door. The flame stabilizes. It returns to a perfect, silent wall of yellow-white fire. You let out a breath, but you can't relax. You have to do this all night, every hour. This intense focus leads us to an obscure, slightly creepy physiological fact. Lighthouse eye. Keepers often developed a specific type of visual damage. Because they spend hours every night staring at a bright light against a pitch-black background, their retinas would get burned. Many old keepers had a permanent blind spot in the center of their vision. When they looked at you, They would have to turn their heads slightly to the side to see your face, because looking straight at you meant seeing a black hole. It was a mark of the trade, like a coal miner's cough. You check the oil flow. The lamp consumes about 2 gallons of paraffin a night. You have to hand pump the pressure cistern to keep the fuel feeding the wicks. Pump, pump, pump. It is boring, repetitive, and high stress. It is a definition of hurry up and wait. This specific era of technology, the transition from wick lamps to the pressurized vapor lamps, is the subject of a niche but passionate academic debate. The skilling of a keeper. Historians of technology argue that the wick lamp was the peak of the profession. A keeper had to be an artisan. He had to know the personality of the wicks, how the cotton weave affected the burn, how the humidity changed the oil flow. It was an art form. When the vapor lamps and later electricity came in, the job changed. It became about turning valves and flipping switches. The art was lost. Some argue that this technological shift is what eventually led to the automation of lighthouses. Once you took the skill out of the flame, you didn't need a man to watch it anymore. You are standing at the very end of the era where human hands were essential to the fire. You are the last of the fire tenders. Suddenly, the draft changes. The wind outside has shifted. The flame flares up, turning orange at the tips. Smoke, you whisper to yourself. You scramble. You adjust the damper, the vent that controls airflow. You tweak the oil valve. You watch the smoke wisp disappearing into the chimney just before it touches the glass. Safe. For now. You wipe the sweat from your eyes. You realize that you haven't blinked in 3 minutes. This is the reality of the night shift. It isn't looking out at the ocean. You rarely look at the ocean. You look at the fire. The ocean is the enemy, but the lamp is your baby. It is a demanding, hungry, temperamental infant that wants to kill you. And speaking of killing you, you realize you haven't eaten since that potato at 4 p.m. Your stomach growls, echoing in the glass room, but you can't leave. The rotation of the watch means you are stuck here until midnight when McGinney comes to relieve you. You look at the darkness pressing against the glass. You are the only light for 20 miles. It feels important. But mostly, it just feels hot. It is midnight. McGinty has relieved you at the lantern. You have descended the 60 feet of spiral stairs, your legs trembling slightly from the tension of the last 4 hours. You step into the kitchen. It is time for the highlight of your day. Dinner. Now, you might imagine that living in the middle of the ocean means you're eating fresh seafood every night. You might picture grilling a nice sea bass or roasting a lobster caught on the rocks. Forget that image immediately. The reality of lighthouse dining is brown, salty, and comes out of a metal can. You sit down at the curved wooden table. The stove is banking down, glowing a dull red. On your plate is a slab of meat that looks like a geological formation. This is corned beef, or as the British sailors call it, salt junk. Here is a mainstream historical fact. In the 19th century, canning technology was still in its awkward teenage phase. The meat was boiled to death, shoved into a tin, and sealed. Sometimes, the seal was made with lead solder. So, while you were eating your beef, you were also getting a microscopic side dish of heavy metal poisoning. This lead accumulates in the body, causing, you guessed it, irritability, confusion, and eventually, madness. Starting to see a pattern here? You pick up your fork. The meat shreds instantly. It tastes of salt, iron, and sadness. There is no texture. It is just protein mush. Next to the meat is your bread. It is a ship's biscuit or hardtack. It isn't a biscuit in the Cookie Monster sense. It is a tile made of flour and water, baked 4 times until it is harder than the table you are sitting at. You can't bite it. If you try, you will break a tooth. And remember, there is no dentist for 20 miles. The protocol is to wrap the biscuit in a cloth and smash it with a hammer, or soak it in your tea until it turns into a paste. You inspect the biscuit closely before soaking it. Why? To check for weevils. These are tiny beetles that lay eggs in the flour. The larvae tunnel through the biscuit. If you find one, don't throw the biscuit away. Food is rationed. You just tap the biscuit on the table until the weevils fall out. If they don't fall out, well, as the old sailors say, it's fresh meat. But the real culinary horror show is the eggs. You crave a fried egg, a fresh, sunny-side-up egg. But chickens don't do well in hurricanes, so you have water glass eggs. This brings us to an obscure domestic preservation fact. Water glass is a common name for sodium silicate. Before refrigeration, people would fill a crock with this thick, syrupy chemical solution and submerge fresh eggs in it. The chemical seals the porous shell, preventing air from getting in and bacteria from rotting the egg. It works. You can keep an egg fresh for 6 months or even a year. But fresh is a relative term. You crack one into the pan. The white isn't white. It's a translucent milky pink. The yolk is flat and rubbery. When it hits the hot pan, it releases a smell that is vaguely chemical, like a wet bandage. It tastes okay, but the texture is soapy. You eat it quickly. Try not to think about the fact that this egg was laid by a chicken that probably died last Easter. You chew your rubbery egg and stare at the dark window. You wonder, why not grow a garden? You aren't the first to think of it. Many keepers tried. They built wooden boxes, hauled up soil from the mainland, and planted carrots or cabbages on the gallery railing. It usually ends the same way. The first gale comes. The wind hits 80 miles per hour. Your garden doesn't just die. It becomes a projectile. There are logbook entries of keepers watching their cabbage patch fly past the lantern room window at Mach 1, disappearing into the Atlantic, after losing 3 crops to the wind and the salt spray, which kills everything green instantly. Most keepers give up. You are a carnivore by necessity. This dietary nightmare leads to a significant academic debate in maritime history. The scurvy on the rocks controversy. We usually associate scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, with sailors on long voyages. But lighthouse keepers were stationary. They were often just a few miles from shore. Yet, records show that keepers frequently suffer from loose teeth, lethargy, and old wounds reopening, classic scurvy symptoms. The debate is, was this negligence by the authorities Trinity House, or was it stubbornness by the keepers? Trinity House eventually mandated that lime juice be sent to the towers, just like on Navy ships. But many keepers refused to drink it. They thought it was sissy, or they preferred their rum. Some historians argue that the authorities failed to provide canned vegetables, which were available but expensive, prioritizing cheap salt beef. Others argue the keepers simply hated eating green stuff. Either way, you are sitting there with bleeding gums, looking at a bottle of lime juice that tastes like battery acid, wondering if it's worth it. You finish your meal. You wipe the plate with a piece of bread. You don't wash it. Water is the most precious thing on the rock. The tower has a rain catchment system on the roof, but it collects everything: rain, salt spray, bird poop, and coal soot. It flows into tanks in the basement. It tastes metallic and brackish. You drink it only as tea. For cleaning dishes, you use sand. You scrub the plate with dry sand until the grease is gone, then wipe it with a rag. You sit back, feeling the heavy lump of salted beef settling in your stomach. It sits there like a lead weight. Digestion is slow when you don't move much. You look at the empty chair opposite you. McGinty is up in the light. You are alone in the kitchen. This is the most dangerous time of day. Not physically, but mentally. The work is done. The belly is full, sort of. Now, the mind starts to wander. You look at the curved walls. They seem to be leaning in. You decide to check the barometer on the wall. It's an old brass instrument, polished to a mirror shine. You tap the glass. The needle jumps. It drops. Your stomach tightens. And it's not the beef this time. A drop in pressure means one thing. The air is getting lighter. The weight of the atmosphere is lifting. That means a low-pressure system is coming. You look at the window. The view is gone. It isn't dark anymore. It is white. A thick, milky whiteness is pressing against the glass, swallowing the light of the stars. The wind has died down. The roar of the ocean has changed to a muffled, confused, sloshing sound. You stand up, knocking your stool over. Fog. Fog is the lighthouse keeper's worst nightmare. Storms are scary, but fog is insidious. Fog blinds the light. And if the light can't be seen, you have to make noise. You have to go to the explosive signal. You groan. Your night of sleep just evaporated. You are about to enter a world of noise, so loud it will make your teeth rattle in their sockets. You step out a heavy copper door onto the gallery, the metal walkway that circles the top of the tower, just below the lantern. Usually, this is where you come to see the view. Tonight, there is no view. The world has been erased. The fog is so thick, you can't even see the ocean 70 feet below you. You can't see the stars. You can barely see the handrail in front of your face. The millions of candle powers spinning in the lantern above you are useless. The light hits the water vapor and scatters instantly, creating a glowing milky halo that reaches maybe 50 feet before dying. To a ship captain out there in the dark, you don't exist. He is currently sailing blind toward a granite reef that will rip his hull open like a tin can. Since he can't see you, he has to hear you. You walk over to a strange apparatus bolted to the railing. It looks like a robotic arm or a small crane, known as the jib. Next to it is a heavy iron box. You unlock the box. Inside are what look like oversized candles wrapped in wax paper. They aren't candles. They are charges of tonight. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Before massive compressed air foghorns became standard, the most effective way to warn ships in fog was simply to blow things up. Tonight was a high explosive made from pulverized gun cotton and barium nitrate. It was safer than pure dynamite. It wouldn't explode if you dropped it mostly, but it was still effectively a bomb. Your job for the rest of the night, or however long this fog lasts, is to blow up the sky. Here's the procedure. 1. You take a charge of tonight, about 4 ounces. 2. You attach a detonator to it. 3. You clip it to the end of the jib arm. 4. You winch the arm up until the explosive is suspended in the air above the lantern roof, so you don't shatter the glass lens with a shock wave. 5. You connect the firing cable. 6. You hide behind the curved granite parapet. 7. You press the switch or pull the lanyard. Boom. It is not a thud. It is a crack that feels like someone slapped the inside of your skull. The sound wave hits you in the chest. Even with your hands over your ears, your teeth vibrate. The flash lights up the fog for a split second, turning the world blindingly white. Then silence rushes back in. You check your pocket watch. The regulation says 1 report every 5 minutes. You have 4 minutes and 59 seconds of silence. Then you have to do it again. You reload. You winch. You hide. Boom. This is your life now. You can't read. You can't sleep. You can't think. You are a human metronome of violence. This barbaric method leads us to a famous 19th century scientific feud, the Tyndall versus Douglas debate. In the 1870s, the Lighthouse authorities were torn. James Douglas, the chief engineer of Trinity House, believed that if you just made the light brighter, using electricity or bigger oil burners, it would punch through the fog. He hated fog signals. He thought they were unreliable. On the other side was John Tyndall, a brilliant physicist. He argued that light obeys the laws of optics. It scatters in fog. No matter how bright you make it, it won't work. Sound, however, can bend. He championed the use of sirens and explosives. They held a massive trial at South Foreland, blasting horns and shining lights while sailing ships around to listen and watch. Tyndall won. He proved that in thick fog, a light of 10 million candle power is invisible at 100 yards, but a stick of tonight can be heard for 10 miles. You are currently the living proof of Tyndall's victory, although as your ears start to ring a permanent high C note, you kind of wish Douglas had won. But here's the scary part about sound. It lies. You are standing on the gallery, shivering in the damp mist, waiting for the next shot. You look out at the opaque gray wall. Somewhere out there, there might be a ship. But can they hear you? This brings us to an obscure and terrifying atmosphere phenomenon, the acoustic shadow or zone of silence. Sound waves move through the air, but the air isn't uniform. It has layers of different temperatures and wind speeds. Sometimes, these layers refract the sound waves upward, arching them over the ocean surface. So, you might trigger your explosion. A ship 10 miles away hears it clearly, but a ship 2 miles away hears nothing. The sound literally jumps over them. There are tragic records of shipwrecks where the captain swore he never heard the fog signal, while people on the shore 20 miles inland complained about the noise keeping them awake. The sound skipped the ship. You stand there, realizing the futility. You are setting off bombs that might be totally silent to the one person who needs to hear them. But you keep doing it, because it's the only card you have left to play. Winch. Click. Boom. The smell of the explosion, acrid, sulfurous smoke, mixes with the damp fog. It sticks to your wool coat. You taste the explosive residue on your lips. Your head starts to ache. It's a rhythmic throbbing that matches the blasts. You look at your watch. 3 a.m. The fog hasn't lifted an inch. McGinty comes up to relieve you. He doesn't say a word. He can't really, because you are both temporarily deaf. He just taps you on the shoulder and points to the door. You stumble back inside the lantern room. The silence in here feels heavy, muffled by the ringing in your ears. The lens is still spinning, sweeping its useless beams through the room. You go down the stairs. The granite walls, which usually feel solid, seem to be vibrating slightly, resonating with the aftershocks of the explosions. You reach your bunk. You fall into it, fully clothed. You pull the heavy velvet curtains shut. 3 minutes pass. You start to drift off. Boom. The sound penetrates the stone, the wood, and the velvet. It shakes the bed frame. You groan. You realize you aren't asleep. You're going to lie here, counting the 5-minute intervals, praying for the wind to blow. You think about the poor souls on the ships. They are praying for the sound. You are praying for the silence. It's a conflict of interest. Then, just as you resign yourself to a night of misery, you hear a new sound. It's faint between the explosions. Tap, tap, thud. Something is hitting the glass of the lantern room above. It sounds like hail, but hail doesn't usually happen in this kind of fog. You lie there listening. Thump, flap, thump. It's not hail. It's soft. It's flesh. You realize what is happening. The light, useless as it is to the ships, has found a different audience. The fog has confused the migration routes. You are about to deal with the messy aftermath of the fatal attraction. You are back in the lantern room. The explosive fog signal is still firing every 5 minutes outside. Boom! Silence. Boom. But inside the glass bubble, you are dealing with a different kind of bombardment. You are standing in the center of a feathered blizzard. Here is what happens. Migratory birds, usually starlings, thrushes, or blackbirds, use the stars and the moon to navigate. But on a foggy, moonless night like this, those celestial cues are gone. They are flying blind. Suddenly, a massive, brilliant moon appears in the mist below them. It is your lighthouse. They are drawn to it. It is a phenomenon called positive phototaxis. But unlike moths that just flutter around a porch light, these are flocks of thousands, moving at 30 miles per hour. They don't just fly toward the light. They become trapped by it. They enter the dazzling beams and become disoriented. They can't leave the illuminated zone. They circle. They orbit. And eventually, they crash. You look out the glass. It is a scene from a Hitchcock movie, 60 years before Hitchcock filmed it. Thousands of birds are swirling around the tower. They look like a chaotic cloud of ash. Every few seconds, one of them miscalculates and slams into the thick plate glass of the lantern. Thud, thud, crack. You flinch every time. You aren't worried about the birds. You are worried about the glass. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The glass of a lighthouse lantern is tough, usually quarter-inch plate glass, but isn't invincible. A 3-ounce starling is fine, but if a heavy-sea duck, a cormorant, or a gannet hits the glass at full speed, it goes right through. There are terrified logbook entries from the 19th century describing nights where a duck smashed through the window, shattered the priceless Fresnel lens inside, and extinguished the lamp, plunging the lighthouse into darkness in the middle of a storm. The keepers then had to spend the rest of the night trying to relight a wind-blown lamp, while standing in a pile of broken glass and dead duck. To prevent this, you grab the storm panes. These are metal grills or extra sheets of glass that you can bolt onto the inside of the lantern windows. You work quickly, your shadow dancing on the walls as the beams sweep around. You are reinforcing the bunker. Outside, the noise is pathetic and horrifying. It's a chorus of chirping, squeaking, and the frantic fluttering of wings against the glass. The birds are exhausted. They are clinging to the astragals, the window bars, staring in at you with black, bead-like eyes. They look desperate. They want the warmth. They want the light. But the light is the thing that is killing them. You finish securing the panes. There is nothing else you can do. You can't turn off the light. You just have to let nature run its course. By dawn, the fog begins to lift. The explosions finally stop. The silence that follows is ringing and heavy. You step out onto the gallery to assess the damage. It looks like a massacre. The iron walkway is carpeted in feathers and small bodies. There are hundreds of them. Starlings, mostly. Some are still alive, stunned, huddled in corners. Most are not. This leads to an obscure, slightly grim culinary fact. The keeper's pie. You have been eating salt beef that tastes like old shoe leather for 3 weeks. You are craving fresh meat. You look down at the gallery floor. You don't see a tragedy. You see a buffet. It was standard practice for keepers to collect the fresh kills. Starlings are small, but if you get 20 of them, you have a pie. Thrushes are even better. You and McGinney walk around the gallery with a bucket, picking up the best ones. It sounds heartless to modern ears, but out here, waste is a sin. The ocean provided a delivery of fresh protein, and you are going to accept it. Plucking them is a tedious job. But tonight, the kitchen will smell of roast bird instead of paraffin, and that is a victory. As you shovel the rest of the unfortunate avian travelers over the side of the railing, watching them fall into the sea to feed the fish, you are witnessing the center of a massive academic debate, the fatal attraction theory. For over a century, ornithologists have argued about why birds do this. The trap hypothesis suggests that the light bleaches their visual purple rhodopsin, temporarily blinding them so they literally can't see the dark anymore. They are trapped in a light bubble because the darkness looks like a solid wall. The compass hypothesis suggests they use the light as a reference point, try and keep it at a constant angle, like they do with the moon, which forces them into a tightening spiral until they hit the glass. In the late Victorian era, a German naturalist named Heinrich Gacke spent years on the island of Heligoland studying this. He proposed that lighthouses were actually altering the evolution of bird species by wiping out the ones most attracted to light. Conservationists eventually stepped in. They forced Trinity House to build bird perches on the towers, resting places where birds could land without hitting the glass. Did the perches work? No. The birds ignored them. They wanted the light, not a nap. Eventually, the solution wasn't perches. It was changing the light itself. We discovered that steady beams trap birds more than flashing ones, and colored light is less attractive than white. But in 1891, you don't know that yet. You just have a white, steady, rotating beam that acts like a death ray for starlings. You finish cleaning the gallery. You scrub the bird droppings off the white paint. The tower must be pristine. Breakfast. McGinney calls from below. You go down to the kitchen. The bucket of birds is on the table. You will deal with them later. For now, it's tea and hardtack again. You sit down, exhausted. The sun is up. The sky is blue. The fog is a bad memory. But as you sip your tea, you notice something strange about the atmosphere in the room. It's quiet. Too quiet. You realize that you and McGinney haven't spoken a real sentence to each other in 2 days, other than operational commands, wind it, skim it, breakfast. You look at him. He is staring at the wall, chewing his beard. You remember the rule. 3 men to a tower. Why 3? Why not 2? 2 men can run the light easily. Why pay for a 3rd? The answer lies in a story that every keeper knows. A story about a lighthouse called the Smalls, and a man who had to wave at a corpse for 3 weeks. You are about to learn why the ghost of the 3rd man is the most important regulation in the book. You are sitting in the kitchen, staring at your cup of tea. Opposite you, Mr. McGinty is whittling a piece of driftwood. He hasn't spoken in 4 hours. The silence in the tower is heavy. It feels like a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. You look at him. He looks old. His face is flushed red from the heat of the stove, or maybe it's high blood pressure. He coughs, a wet, rattling sound that echoes in the stone room. A dark thought crosses your mind. It's involuntary, but it's there. What happens if he dies? If this were a ship, You would wrap him in canvas, say a prayer, and slide him into the ocean. Burial at sea. Simple, dignified. But you can't do that here. If you throw McGinty into the Atlantic, and the relief boat arrives 3 weeks later to find you alone, looking healthy and well-fed, what are they going to think? They aren't going to think natural causes. They are going to think you snapped, hit him with a coal shovel, and fed him to the sharks. You can't prove you didn't kill him. This specific paranoia is the reason why there are 3 of you assigned to this tower. Or there should be, if the third man hadn't missed a boat due to illness. The rule of 3 isn't about workload. It's about witness protection. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact that is the bedrock of Lighthouse lore. The Smalls Lighthouse incident of 1801. Every keeper knows this story. It's our version of a campfire ghost story, except it's documented in the official archives of Trinity House. The Smalls was a wooden lighthouse before the stone one, standing on a grid of oak legs 20 miles off the coast of Wales. It was manned by 2 keepers, Thomas Howell and Thomas Griffith. They hated each other. It was well known. They argued about the chores, the food, the light. They were enemies trapped in a box. Then tragedy struck. Griffith fell ill. He deteriorated rapidly and died in his bunk. Howell was left alone with the corpse of his enemy. He knew the optics were bad. If he tossed the body, he would hang for murder. He had to keep the body as evidence. At first, he kept Griffith in the bunk, but after a few days, the smell became unbearable. The ventilation in a lighthouse is terrible, and a decomposing body in a warm room is a biological hazard. Howell couldn't breathe. He realized he had to move him outside, but he couldn't just leave him on the gallery. The bird would get him, or a wave would wash him away. So Howell, in a feat of grim determination, built a makeshift coffin out of the interior bulkheads. He placed Griffith inside and lashed the coffin vertically to the gallery railing, outside the window. It was a good plan, until the storm came. The wind hit hurricane force. The waves smashed against the tower. The lashings on the coffin loosened. The wood shattered. One of the coffin boards ripped away. Griffith's body was exposed. The wind caught his dead arm. For the next 2 weeks, every time Howell looked out the window to check the weather, he saw his dead roommate waving at him. Flap, flap, flap. The wind would catch the arm, lifting it up as if to say, "Come out here, Thomas. Come join me." By the time the relief boat finally arrived, Thomas Howell was alive, but he was gone. His hair, which had been jet black when he landed, had turned completely white. He was huddled in the lantern room, broken by the waving corpse. Because of him, Trinity House changed the regulations. From that day on, no offshore lighthouse was ever manned by fewer than 3 men. If one died, the other 2 could corroborate the story. You look back at McGinty. He coughs again. You sip your tea nervously. This leads to a fascinating academic debate in the field of sociology and isolation psychology. The triad dynamic versus the dyad. Sociologists argue that adding a third person doesn't actually solve the tension. It just changes the geometry of the hatred. In a dyad, 2 people, the tension is direct. If you fight, it's 1-on-1. But in a triad, 3 people, you almost inevitably get a 2-on-1 dynamic. 2 keepers bond, and the third becomes the outcast. There are records of towers where 2 keepers would stop speaking to the third man entirely. They would pass notes. They would cook separate meals. The third man would live in a hell of silence, surrounded by people. Some historians argue that the mental health outcomes for the outcast third were actually worse than for the solitary keepers. At least when you are alone, you don't have people actively ignoring you. So, which is worse, the waving corpse of the Smalls or the silent treatment for 3 months? You decide to break the silence. Barometer's dropping again. You say, McGinty looks up. He stops whittling. Is it? He stands up and walks to the brass instrument on the wall. He taps it. The needle doesn't just drop. It falls off a cliff. He frowns. That's not a breeze, he mutters. That's a buster. He turns to you, and for the first time in days, there's a connection. The petty annoyances of the last week, the way you chew your biscuit, the way he smells, evaporate. The us versus him dynamic has shifted. It is no longer you versus McGinty. It is now us, the humans, versus it, the ocean. Storm pains, he barks. Check the gallery door bolts. Double lash the oil cans. The energy in the tower changes instantly. The lethargy of the fog is gone. You scramble up the stairs. You can hear it coming now. It isn't the whistle of the wind anymore. It's a low, deep vibration, like a freight train approaching from under the water. The ocean is waking up. Here is an obscure meteorological fact. A rapidly dropping barometer of bombogenesis can cause physical pain, as the air pressure inside the tower remains relatively stable while the pressure outside plummets. Your ears pop, your sinuses ache. Old broken bones start to throb. Your body predicts the storm before your eyes see it. You reach the lantern room. The sky is a bruised purple-black. The clouds are moving so fast they look like smoke. The sea below is no longer a surface. It is a chaotic landscape of white foam and black valleys. You are about to find out what it feels like to live inside a pendulum, because that is the secret of the stone tower. It looks solid. It looks immovable, but if it didn't move, it would snap. You tighten the last bolt on the storm shutter. The first heavy wave hits the base of the tower. Thud. The impact travels up through 120 feet of granite. The floor jumps beneath your feet. The glass prisms of the lens jingle like wind chimes. Hold on, you whisper to yourself. The ghost of the third man is forgotten. The real ghost is the storm, and it is trying to break in. You are standing in the lantern room. It is 2 a.m. The world outside has ceased to be a place of air and water. It has become a single, screaming entity of grave violence. We are no longer talking about bad weather. We are talking about a Force 11 violent storm. The Atlantic Ocean has decided that it hates your tower personally. The noise is the first thing that breaks you. It isn't just the wind anymore. It's a physical bombardment. The wind is hitting the glass at 90 miles per hour, creating a shriek that sounds like a jet engine testing its afterburners inside a cathedral. But underneath that high-pitched scream is a bass note, the deep, rhythmic boom of the waves hitting the rock below. Every time a wave hits, the entire tower shudders. It's not a sway, we'll get to that later. It's a vibration. It feels like a giant hammer is hitting the foundations. The mercury in the bath ripples. The tools on the bench rattle. Your teeth chatter. And it's not just in the cold. You look out the window. You expect to see rain. But you don't. You see the ocean. Here is a mainstream historical fact that sounds like an exaggeration until you are standing here. In a severe storm, the waves don't just hit the bottom of the tower. They go over it. You are 120 feet above sea level. You should be safe. But then a massive black mountain of water rises up out of the dark. It keeps rising. It blocks out the horizon. It blocks out the sky. And then it crashes. Green water, solid, heavy ocean water, not just spray, smashes into the glass of the lantern room. For a few seconds, you are underwater. You are in a submarine at the top of a tower. The light beams refract wildly through the water, turning the room into a spinning kaleidoscope of green and white. You instinctively duck, covering your head, waiting for the glass to shatter. But the glass holds. The water drains away, leaving foam sliding down the panes. You gasp for air. You realize you just stared a tsunami in the face and won. This terrifying phenomenon leads us to a specific obscure fact: the rock throwers. You might think that at this height, the only debris you have to worry about is water. Wrong. The power of these waves is so immense that they can rip boulders off the seabed, carry them up the side of the tower, and hurl them to the lantern glass. There are records of keepers finding 100-pound rocks on the gallery walkway after a storm. Rocks that were thrown 100 feet into the air. Imagine that. The ocean is literally stoning you. You are living in a glass house, and the Atlantic is throwing boulders. You check the lamp. The flame is flickering wildly. The air pressure inside the lantern is fluctuating with every wave. The draft is going crazy. You have to constantly adjust the damper, fighting to keep the flame from blowing out or smoking. You are sweating, cursing, and praying, all at the same time. Down below, McGinty is in the kitchen. He is sitting on the floor, wedged between the coal bunk and the wall. Why? Because you can't fall off the floor. This brings us to a massive structural academic debate: the monolithic versus skeletal design theory. In the 19th century, engineers like the Stephensons and James Douglas argued fiercely about how to build these towers. One camp, the monoliths, believed in brute force. Build a solid stone tower, heavy enough to punch the waves back, making an artificial cliff. The other camp, the skeletals, believed in hydrodynamic transparency. They wanted to build towers on iron legs like spider webs, so the waves would pass through them without impact. You are currently inside a monolith. You are inside a philosophy that says, I am stronger than the ocean. But as the floor jumps beneath your feet again, you wonder if the skeletal guys had a point. When a solid wave hits a solid tower, the energy has to go somewhere. It goes into the stone. It goes into your bones. The sheer violence of the impact is measuring in tons per square foot. Thomas Stephenson, Robert Lewis's dad, actually invented a wave dynamometer to measure this. He bolted it to the side of a lighthouse. He recorded impacts of 6,000 pounds per square foot. That is like having a pickup truck dropped on every single floor tile of your house, simultaneously, every 12 seconds. You look at the mercury bath. This is the real danger. The tower is shaking so much that the mercury is sloshing. If it spills, you have a toxic hazmat spill in a confined space during a hurricane. You grab the storm covers, heavy wooden lids, and clamp them down over the trough. You are sealing the poison in. Suddenly, a sound cuts through the roar. Crack. It came from below. Your heart stops. Did the foundation crack? Did the door give way? You grab the service lamp and scramble down the ladder. You slide down the spiral stairs, feeling the G-force as the tower moves. You reach the bedroom level. A massive wave has smashed the window shutter. The window itself, thick glass and a brass frame, is cracked but holding. But the heavy iron shutter, which is supposed to protect it, has been bent inward like a piece of tin foil. Water is jetting in through the seal, spraying across the room. If that window goes, the ocean enters. If the ocean enters, the air pressure changes, and the lantern upstairs could explode outward. You scream for McGinty. He appears from the kitchen, looking grim. He has a hammer and a bag of oakum, tarred rope fiber used for caulking ships. Wedgies, he yells. You work together, jamming wooden wedges and oakum into the gap, hammering them tight while the water sprays you in the face. It is cold, salty, and violent. You are fighting a leak in a sinking ship that happens to be vertical. You manage to stop the spray. You collapse on the wet floor, panting. McGinty looks at you. He wipes salt water from his beard. She's taking a beating tonight. He shouts over the noise. Will it hold? You ask. He looks at the wall. The granite blocks are visibly vibrating. You can feel the mortar straining. It's held for 30 years, he says. Then he adds, unhelpfully, the old one didn't know. He is referring to the previous lighthouse on this rock, or a nearby one, which likely washed away in a similar storm, taking the keepers with it. That's why this one is here. We are the replacement crew for the martyrs. You go back up to the lantern. There is no sleep tonight. You have to watch the glass. You have to watch the flame. You look out at the chaos. The beams of the lens are cutting through the storm, illuminating the spray. It looks like you are inside a snow globe filled with milk and hate. And then you feel it. It's not the vibration. It's not the shudder. It is a long, slow, sickening movement. The tower is leaning. You freeze. It leans, and then slowly swings back. It is bending. You grab the handrail. You thought granite was rigid. You thought stone didn't bend. You were wrong. You are about to learn the terrifying physics of elasticity. You are gripping the brass handrail of the lantern room, so hard your knuckles are white. At first, you tell yourself it is just your imagination. It's a trick of the inner ear. The noise, the adrenaline, the exhaustion. It's making you dizzy. Granite towers do not bend. They are made of thousands of tons of Cornish rock. They are the definition of solid. But then you look at the mercury bath. The heavy iron trough is bolted to the floor. The liquid inside should be level. But as you watch, the silver pool slowly sloshes to the left. Then it pauses. Then it sloshes to the right. It isn't a vibration. It is a long, slow, Sickening sway. You are moving. The entire building, all 140 feet of it, is swinging back and forth like an upside-down pendulum. Here is a mainstream historical fact that keeps engineers up at night. A well-built rock lighthouse is designed to sway. If it were perfectly rigid, the energy of the wave impacts would have nowhere to go. It would shatter the masonry. Instead, the tower absorbs the energy by flexing. The movement isn't huge at the bottom, but thanks to the laws of leverage, the movement is amplified at the top. You are essentially sitting in the crow's nest of a stone ship. The tower can sway up to 6 inches, or even a foot at the top during a hurricane. Imagine standing in your living room, and the entire room moves 6 inches to the left, holds for a second, and then moves 6 inches to the right. Now do that every 10 seconds for 12 hours. It is inducing a very specific, very cruel form of seasickness. You are nauseous, but you can't go on deck for fresh air because on deck is currently underwater. You look down at the floor. You try to visualize what is happening beneath your feet. This brings us to the genius of John Smeaton, the father of the modern lighthouse. Before Smeaton, builders just piled stones on top of each other, held together by gravity and mortar. When the waves hit, the stones slid apart. The towers collapsed. Smeaton looked at an oak tree. He saw how the roots gripped the ground and how the trunk flexed in the wind. He decided to build a tree out of stone. He invented dovetailed masonry. The granite blocks of this tower aren't just stacked. They are puzzle pieces. Each block is cut with intricate, interlocking tabs and slots that fit into the blocks next to it, above it and below it. Even without mortar, you couldn't pull them apart. The tower is effectively one single, massive, flexible bone. So, when the tower leans, the stones are pulling against each other, the dovetails locking tight, distributing the tension to the entire skeleton. You are trusting your life to a 3D jigsaw puzzle cut by hand in 1890. The sway becomes hypnotic. Lean, hold, return. You feel the G-force in your stomach. It feels like an elevator that can't decide if it's going up or down. McGinty comes up the ladder. He looks green. Even the old sea dog is feeling it. She's lively tonight, he groans, grabbing a stanchion for balance. He pulls a piece of string out of his pocket. Tied to the end is a heavy brass nut. He hangs it from a hook on the ceiling beam. It's an improvised plumb bob. You watch the nut. As the tower sways, the nut tries to hang straight down, which makes it look like it is swinging across the room. It sweeps back and forth over floor tile. 6 inches. McGinney estimates. Not bad. The Wolf Rock does double that. Not bad, you scream internally. The building is bending. This elasticity is the subject of fascinating academic debate in structural engineering, the elastic limit controversy. In the 19th century, nobody really knew how much granite could bend before it snapped. It was all empirical. Engineers argued about the modulus of elasticity of stone masonry. Some theorists claimed that the mortar was the weak point, that eventually the constant flexing would pulverize the lime cement between the stones, leaving them loose. Others argued the weight of the tower alone compression was enough to keep it solid. There are horror stories of towers that swayed too much. Keepers at the Bishop Rock reported that during storms, the sway was so violent that the water would slosh out of the toilet bowls and buckets, and plates would slide off the table. They lived in a poltergeist house animated by physics. The storm outside screams a new note. A rogue wave hits. Wham! The tower shudders violently, disrupting the smooth sway. The plumb bob swings wildly. A bottle of oil falls off the shelf and smashes on the floor. You scramble to clean it up. You are on your hands and knees, sliding on the oily floor while the room tilts. It is a slapstick comedy directed by a sadist. Don't let it get in the mercury. McGinty yells. You wipe up the oil, your stomach churning. You realize that this is the true test of the keeper. It isn't the loneliness. It isn't the ghosts. It's the ability to perform precise maintenance while living inside a cocktail shaker. You look at the glass prisms of the lens. They are vibrating. The light beams are jittering on the clouds. The whole world feels fragile. You wonder about the resonance frequency. You know that soldiers break step when crossing a bridge, so they don't march at the bridge's natural frequency and collapse it. What is the natural frequency of this tower? And is the ocean figuring it out? Every wave feels like a punch in the kidneys. You find yourself timing them. 1, 2, 3, crash. You try to distract yourself. You think about the people on the mainland, asleep in their beds that don't move. They have no idea. They think lighthouses are stoic, immovable symbols of safety. They don't know that the safety is trembling. Hours pass. The rhythm of the sway seeps into your bones. You stop fighting it. You learn to lean with it, like a sailor on a deck. You become part of the tower's elasticity. And then, just as dawn begins to break, the rhythm changes. The wind drops. The impacts become less frequent. The sway lessens. It goes from 6 inches to 3, then to 1. The pendulum is slowing down. You walk out onto the gallery. The wind is still gale force, but it's breathable now. The ocean is still a white nightmare, but the mountains of water have shrunk to hills. You look down at the walkway. The storm has left you a gift. It's not a rock this time, and it's not a bird. It is silver flapping and very much out of place. You are standing 120 feet above the sea, and there is a fish flopping on your boots. This is the absurd reality of the green water strikes. The waves that went over the tower weren't just water. They were ecosystems. They carried marine life up into the sky and deposited it on your balcony. You look at the fish. It's a whiting or maybe a small pollock. It looks confused. You know exactly how it feels. You pick it up. It's slippery and cold. Breakfast, McGinty says, appearing behind you. He doesn't look surprised. He just looks hungry. The storm tried to kill you, tried to shake the tower apart, and tried to poison you with mercury. But in the end, it just delivered free groceries. You take the fish to the kitchen. The tower is still vibrating gently, a soothing hum after the violence of night. You survive the bend. You survive the shake. Now you eat the fish. You're standing on the gallery, holding a slippery, cold, and very confused fish. It is a surreal moment that your brain struggles to process. You are 120 feet in the air. You are on top of a stone needle in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You do not have a fishing rod. You do not have a net. You have simply walked out your front door after a hurricane and picked up breakfast off the floor. This is the Lighthouse delivery service. You look around the gallery. The storm has passed its peak, but the ocean is still heaving with a leftover, resentful energy. The walkway, usually pristine white, is littered with the debris of the night. There is seaweed wrapped around the iron railings like party streamers. There are small rocks, and there are fish. You spot another one, a small pollock, gasping near the lightning rod. And over there, wedged under the fog signal equipment, is a crab, a live, angry crab, waving its claws at the sky, wondering how it got promoted to the penthouse. Here is a mainstream historical fact. This phenomenon is recorded in the logbooks of almost every major rock lighthouse in Britain. At the Bishop Rock Lighthouse, which stands 160 feet tall, keepers famously found sand and gravel on the gallery after storms. Think about the physics of that. The wave didn't just splash. A solid sheet of water, carrying the seabed itself, climbed a 16-story building. You gather your bounty. It feels like looting a shipwreck. You put the fish and the crab into a bucket. You look at the crab. He looks back. You decide he is too angry to eat. You toss him over the rail. He falls 120 feet back into the surf. He probably has a great story to tell his friends. If crabs have friends, you take the fish down to the kitchen. The mood in the tower has shifted. The terrifying, elastic swaying has stopped. The vibration has settled into a gentle hum. The smell of fear and mercury is replaced by the smell of hope. McGinty is already stoking the stove. He looks at the fish with the eyes of a man who had forgotten what fresh protein looks like. "Gut em," he says. "I'll get the butter." You take a knife to the fish. It is messy work, but you don't mind. This is fresh meat. It hasn't been salted, cured, tinned, or boiled to death. It was swimming 6 hours ago. As you fry the fillets in the pan, the smell fills the room. It cuts through the paraffin stench. It smells like a beachside restaurant. It smells like life. This strange delivery method brings us to a massive, century-long academic debate. The rogue wave skepticism. For most of the 19th and 20th centuries, lighthouse keepers and sailors would come back to shore with stories of freak waves or rogue waves, walls of water 80 or 100 feet high that appeared out of nowhere in a calm sea, or waves that were double the size of the storm swell. Scientists and oceanographers laughed at them. They looked at the mathematical models, linear wave theory, and said, "Impossible. The math says waves can't get that big. You were drunk or you were exaggerating." For 100 years, the keepers pointed to the fish on their 100-foot-high balconies and said, "Then how did this get here?" The scientists replied, "Wind spray, or a bird dropped it." It wasn't until New Year's Day in 1995 that the Dropner wave hit an oil platform in the North Sea. It was measured by laser sensors. It was 84 feet high in a sea of 39-foot waves. The scientists finally looked at the data and said, "Oh, you were right. You are eating the evidence of phenomenon that science refused to believe for a century. You're eating the impossible fish. The taste is incredible. It's flaky, sweet, and soft. It melts in your mouth. You and McGinty eat in silence, but it's a companionable silence now. You are survivors. You have weathered the buster. After breakfast, you have a new burst of energy. You decide to try fishing for real. This is an obscure hobby of rock lighthouse keepers. When the weather is calm or calmish, you can't just walk down the beach to fish. You are stuck on the tower. So you use a kite line. You get a massive ball of twine. You attach a heavy lead weight and a hook baited with a piece of leftover salt beef. You stand on the gallery railing, lean over the abyss, and drop the line. It falls 120 feet to the water, then sinks another 50 feet to the reef. Fishing from this height is a bizarre sensory experience. You can't feel the bite. The line is too long, and the wind drags on it. You just wait for a tug that feels like a snag. Then you haul, and you haul, and you haul. Pulling a 10-pound cod up 120 feet of vertical distance is a workout. By the time the fish reaches the gallery railing, it is usually spinning like a propeller. You have to lean over, secured by a rope around your waist, and grab it before it unhooks and falls back to freedom. There are photos from the 1900s of keepers posing proudly on the gallery with conger eels the size of fire hoses. It was the only way to supplement the diet. It was extreme sport fishing before extreme sports existed. But today, you don't catch anything. The water is still too churned up. The fish are hiding deep, traumatized by the storm just like you were. You win the line back in. You lean on the railing, looking out at the horizon. The visibility has cleared. The sun is sparkling on the whitecaps. The world looks innocent again. But then you look at the flagstaff. The lighthouse has a flagpole bolted to the gallery. It's used for signaling ships and communicating with the shore. The pole is empty. The halyard, the rope used to raise the flag, has snapped in the storm. It is flapping uselessly in the wind, tangled around the top of the pole, 10 feet above your head. This is a problem. The lighthouse isn't just a lamp. It's a signal station. You need to be able to fly the Trinity House ensign. You need to be able to signal all well to the passing relief boat whenever it comes. Without that rope, you are mute. You look at McGinty. He is picking fish bones out of his teeth. "You're the youngest," he says, looking at the slippery, wet iron pole that sticks out over a 120-foot drop. "Shimmy up there and fix it." You swallow hard. The breakfast fish suddenly feels like it wants to come back up. You have to climb a wet pole with no safety harness. This is 1891. Leaning out over the ocean to untangle a piece of rope. This brings up a fascinating aspect of lighthouse psychology, the illusion of safety. Inside the tower, behind the thick glass and granite, you feel invincible. But the moment you step outside the door, the safety evaporates. The gallery railing is waist high. If you slip, you die. If you faint, you die. If a gust of wind catches you while you are climbing the flagpole, you are gone. There are no OSHA regulations here. There is just you, your grip strength, and gravity. You take a deep breath. You grab the pole. It is cold and slick with salt. You wrap your legs around it. You begin to shimmy. The wind whips at your uniform. You look down, mistake. The waves are churning white foam on the rocks far below. You look up. The tangled rope is just out of reach. You stretch. You are suspended in the blue void. You are a circus performer with no audience. Your fingers brush the knot. You claw at it. It loosens. Got it. You yell, the wind tearing the words from your mouth. You slide back down, hitting the iron grating of the gallery with a thud. Your heart is hammering a techno beat. You retie the rope. You hoist a flag. The red and white ensign of Trinity House snaps in the wind. You have reestablished civilization. You have declared to the world that the light is still here, and the men inside are still alive. But does anyone see it? You look toward the mainland. It is a faint, gray smudge on the horizon, 10 miles away. Can they see your flag? Can they see your flash? Or have they forgotten you? You realize that you need to talk to them, not just wave a flag. You need to send a message. You need the semaphore. You are standing on the gallery, sweating in your heavy wool uniform. The sun is blazing. The storm has scrubbed the sky clean, leaving a blue so deep it looks painted. You are staring at the mainland. It is a green and brown smudge on the horizon, about 10 to 15 miles away. Somewhere on that smudge is a white tower, the shore station. Inside that tower is a man with a telescope. His entire job is to look at you. You want to talk to him. You have just survived a Force 11 storm. You have eaten a fish off the floor. You want to say, we are alive, but you can't text him. You can't call him. You have to flash him. You set up the heliograph. This is a piece of Victorian tech that feels like magic. It is a mirror mounted on a tripod with a sighting vane. You aim the vane at the distant shore station. Then you use a small key to tilt the mirror, catching the sun and bouncing a beam of blinding light directly into the eye of the man with the telescope. Click-clack, click-clack. You tap out the message in Morse code. Dash. You are sending the standard signal. All well. You wait. You squint through your own binoculars, watching the distant white tower. You are waiting for a flash in return. Acknowledgement. Thumbs up from civilization. Nothing. You wait 5 minutes. The heat haze shimmering off the water makes the shore look like it's melting. Maybe he's making tea. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Maybe he's asleep. You try again. Dash. Still nothing. This frustration brings us to a mainstream historical fact. Before radio, lighthouses were islands of silence. The only link to the world was visual. If it was foggy, silence. If it was night, silence. If the man on the shore forgot to look, silence. There are records of keepers dying of heart attacks, and their partners hoisting the flag at half-mast to signal death. But because there was no wind that day, the flag hung limp. The shore station couldn't see it. The surviving keeper had to live with the corpse for a week until the wind picked up enough to unfurl the flag. You give up on the mirror. You decide to try the semaphore. Some lighthouses had mechanical arms, like railway signals, bolted to the gallery. You crank a handle inside, and the arms wave up and down. Left arm up, right arm down. It's a game of charades played across an ocean, but it's exhausting, and it highlights a massive academic and technological debate of the late 19th century, the cable versus pigeon controversy. Yes, pigeons. In the 1880s and 90s, Trinity House was desperate to solve this communication gap. They considered laying underwater telegraph cables to the rock towers. But the engineers argued that the chafing of the rocks and the violence of the storms would snap the cables in a week. They were right. Early cables failed constantly. So, the biological faction proposed pigeon post. They actually trained carrier pigeons to fly from rock lighthouses to the shore. It sounded perfect. Cheap, renewable, wireless. But there was a flaw. The flaw was the peregrine falcon. The cliffs of the mainland were infested with falcons. The falcons quickly realized that the lighthouses were essentially vending machines that released a slow, fat, delicious pigeon every morning at 9 a.m. The pigeon post became a falcon buffet. The experiment was a bloody disaster and was quietly abandoned. So here you are, in 1891, stuck between the failed pigeons and the not yet invented radio. You stare at the shore. You feel a profound sense of the overview effect, but in reverse. Usually, astronauts look down at Earth and feel connected to humanity. You are looking at humanity and feeling like an alien. You can see the smoke from cottage chimneys. You can see a train moving along the coastal track. People are living their lives, buying bread, reading papers, falling in love. And you are here, play with a mirror. Finally, you see it. A tiny white spark on the horizon. Flash. Then another. Flash. He saw you. The man on the shore has finished his tea. He is signaling back. RECIVD. That's it. One word. But it changes everything. You aren't a ghost anymore. You have been observed. The quantum state of your isolation has collapsed. You exist. You pack up the heliograph, feeling a ridiculous surge of joy. It's a Victorian equivalent of getting a read receipt on a risky text message. But then, the flash continues. He has more to say. Flash, flash, flash. You decode the letters as they come in. B, O, A, T. Your heart leaps. The relief boat. Is it coming early? Are you going home? C, O, M, I, N, G. Yes. I, T. Ash? With what? Fresh vegetables? Rum? Letters from home? I, N, S, P, E, C, T, O, R. Your blood runs cold. The joy evaporates instantly, replaced by a stomach-churning dread. The inspector. This brings us to an obscure but terrifying reality of the Lighthouse service. The surprise inspection. The Trinity House superintendent is a god. He travels on the relief tender, wearing a suit and a bowler hat. He can fire you on the spot. He can dock your pay. He can banish you to a worse lighthouse. Yes, they exist. And they are obsessed with one thing: brass. You look around the lantern room. The storm has left salt streaks on the glass. The brass handrails are dull from the damp air. There's a faint smell of fried fish in the kitchen. You are in deep trouble. You scramble down the ladder. McGinty, you scream. They're coming. McGinty, who was dozing in the kitchen, wakes up like he's been shot. The superintendent? Yes. The boat is leaving the shore. You have maybe 3 hours before they arrive. That is not enough time. It takes 3 days to clean a lighthouse properly. You grab the rotten stone, a powdered limestone used for polishing, and a rag. McGinty grabs a mop. The peaceful post-store reflection is over. The existential dread of isolation is gone, replaced by the very practical dread of a man with a white glove checking for dust on top of your oil cisterns. You start scrubbing. You scrub until your fingers cramp. You scrub the soot off the ceiling. You scrub the cold dust off the floor. You polish the lens until it hurts your eyes to look at it. This leads to the psychology of the surface. In a lighthouse, cleanliness isn't just about hygiene. It's about discipline. It's the only metric they have to judge your sanity. If the brass is dirty, it means you are slipping. It means the madness is getting in. A shiny tap proves you are still human. So you polish for your life. You polish the copper pipes. You polish the brass weights. You even polish the coal shovel. 2 hours later, you are sweating, covered in black dust. But the room gleams. It looks like a jewelry box. You hear the steam whistle. Hooked to it, you run to the window. The tender ship is there, bobbing in the swell. A small boat is being lowered. In the back of the boat sits a man in a stiff collar and a bowler hat, holding a clipboard. He looks like he means business. You rush to the bedroom to change into your number ones, your dress uniform with the brass buttons. You button it up wrong, curse, and rebutton it. You splash water on your face. You stand by the heavy copper door at the entrance. You and McGinty stand at attention, stiff as boards. The door handle turns. Clang. The door swings open. The smell of the ocean rushes in, followed by the inspector. He steps onto the mat. He doesn't say hello. He runs his finger along the top of the door frame. He looks at his finger. You hold your breath. The inspector stares at his finger. You stop breathing. You are staring at that finger as if it were a loaded gun. It hovers in the air, suspended in the damp silence of the entrance room. He rubs his thumb against his fingertip. He inspects the skin ridges. There is no dust. He grunts. It isn't a happy grunt. It's the sound of a predator that missed its first pounce but knows there is plenty of prey left. He wipes his hand on a pristine white handkerchief, puts it back in his pocket, and begins to climb the stairs. You and McGinney fall into step behind him, exchanging a look of sheer terror. This is the royal procession of anxiety. The inspector moves slowly. He touches everything. He runs his hand along the curved white walls. He checks the underside of the handrail. He pauses at the oil room to inspect the soldering on the copper cans. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The standards of Trinity House for England and the Northern Lighthouse Board for Scotland were not just strict, they were fanatical. They were modeled on the Royal Navy, but with an added layer of Victorian obsession with purity. A keeper could be fined for having a button undone on his uniform. He could be fired for having a slovenly beard. The lighthouse was considered a temple of science, and dirt was blasphemy. The inspector reaches the kitchen. This is the danger zone. This is where you actually live. He walks over to the coal stove. He opens the ash door. He peers inside. If there's ash spilled on the floor, you are done. It's clean. You scrubbed that grate with a toothbrush an hour ago. He moves to the table. He picks up a tin plate. He holds it up to the light, looking for grease streaks. Salt stains, he murmurs, spotting a microscopic white line on the rim. Sloppy. He pulls out a notebook and writes something down. You feel your stomach drop. That note could mean a deduction in your pension. It could mean a transfer to a punishment light, usually a rock in the Hebrides where it rains 300 days a year and the locals only speak Gaelic. He turns to his attention to the logbook. This is the Bible of the lighthouse. Every hour, you have to record the barometer, the temperature, the wind direction, the visibility, and the oil consumption. He flips through the pages. Flip, flip, flip. He stops. He points a glove finger at an entry from Tuesday. Ink blot, he says. His voice is flat, devoid of emotion. Page 42. A blot. The ship rolled, sir. McGinty says, his voice tight. Heavy swell. A keeper does not let the swell affect his penmanship, the inspector replies. He writes again in the notebook. This pedantry leads to a famous academic debate in maritime labor history, the bureaucracy of survival. Historians have analyzed these logbooks and found a strange disconnect. During massive storms, where waves were smashing the glass and men were fearing for their lives, the logbook entries remained perfectly neat, documenting the weather in dry, scientific terms. Some argue this was a psychological coping mechanism, imposing order on chaos. Others argue it was fear of the inspector. The men were more afraid of a bad report than a 50-foot wave. The bureaucracy was so powerful that it overrode the instinct for self-preservation. You didn't write, help women die. You wrote, wind force 11, barometer 28.5, visibility nil. The inspector closes the book. He heads for the bedroom. You tense up. The bedroom is where the incident happened. The storm shutter, the leak, the wooden wedges you hammered into the wall to stop the ocean from drowning you. He walks into the curved room. He sees the window. It looks like a disaster zone. The brass frame is bent. There are rough pieces of firewood jammed into the gap, caulked with black tar and rope. It looks ugly. It looks unprofessional. He stares at it for a long time. He reaches out and tugs on one of the wedges. It is solid as a rock. When, he asks. Last night, sir. You say. The 2 a.m. squall. Force 11. He looks at the damage, then looks at the repair. For the first time, his face softens slightly. Good caulking, he grunts. Held the water? Yes, sir. Carry on. He doesn't write in the notebook. This is the unspoken code. He can fine you for dust, but he respects seamanship. If you kept the water out, you did your job. Finally, the lantern room. The holy of holies. He climbs into the glass bubble. He checks the wicks. He checks the oil flow. He checks the mercury bath. This is where many keepers fall. The mercury bath is a trap for dust. If he finds a single fly floating in that toxic metal pool, it shows you haven't skimmed it today. He peers into the trough. It is a perfect mirror. He can see his own bowler hat reflected in the poison. He nods. He walks out to the gallery. He checks the flagstaff, the one you risked your life to fix. He checks the explosive fog signal. He walks back inside, takes off his glove, and extends his hand to McGinty. Satisfactory, he says. That word, satisfactory, is the highest praise you will ever get. They don't do excellent. They don't do good job. Satisfactory means you have met the impossible standard. He turns to you. Pack your bag, son. The relief keeper is in the boat. You're going ashore. The relief. The words hit you like a physical blow. You made it. You survived the inspection. You survived the storm. You are leaving. But then he pauses. He looks at the shelf in the service room. What? He asks, pointing a stern finger. Is that? You freeze. You follow his finger. Sitting on the shelf, behind a tin of polish, is a small, intricate carving. It's a piece of driftwood you whittled during the long, silent hours. It's a model of a ship. It's crude, but it's yours. Personal effects are to be kept in the lockers, he says. Clutter leads to accidents. He picks up the little ship. He looks at it. He puts it back down, but he turns it so it faces the wall. A silent reprimand. This brings up a final obscure cultural fact. Scrimshaw and insanity. The authorities hated keepers having hobbies that created mess, whittling, painting. But they tolerated them because they knew the alternative was madness. There are museums today filled with the incredible art created by lighthouse keepers. Intricate ships and bottles, wool rugs woven from unraveled socks, poetry written on the back of logbook pages. The inspector knows this. He marks you down for clutter, but he doesn't throw it away. He knows that little wooden ship is the only thing that kept you from screaming at the walls last Tuesday. Right, he says, snapping his notebook shut. Boat's waiting. Don't dawdle. He disappears down the stairs. The tension in the room snaps. McGinty lets out a long, shuddering breath. He leans against the lens pedestal. Satisfactory, he repeats, a grin breaking through his beard. The old miserable goat. You run down to the bedroom. You grab your sea bag. You throw your dirty wool socks, your whittling knife, and your Bible into it. You don't fold anything. You just want out. You take one last look at your bunk, the curved banana bed with the velvet curtains. You hated it. You froze in it. You couldn't sleep in it. You are going to miss it. It's a strange realization. This tower has been a prison, but it has also been a womb. It protected you from the storm. It gave you a purpose. You entered as a landlubber, and you are leaving as a keeper. You run down the spiral stairs, your boots clanging on iron, down past the kitchen, past the oil room, past the stores. You reach the entrance door. The inspector is already in the boat. The new keeper, a fresh-faced young guy who looks terrified, is climbing up the ladder. You pass him on the rungs. Watch the third step, you yelled at him. It's slippery. He nods, eyes wide. He has no idea what's coming. He doesn't know about the mercury, or the waving corpse theory, or the taste of water glass eggs. He is you 6 weeks ago. You jump into the boat. The sailors catch you. You sit down on the wooden thwart. The boat pushes off. The distance between you and the rock begins to grow. You are sitting in the small rowboat, your hands gripping the gunwales. The sailors are rowing hard, fighting the swell to get you back to the tender ship. You look back. The lighthouse rises out of the water like a tombstone. From this angle, bobbing in a small boat, it looks impossibly thin. It looks fragile. You can't believe you lived inside that thing. You can't believe that tiny glass bubble at the top held off the entire Atlantic Ocean. You see the figure of the new keeper standing on the gallery. He looks small. He waves. You don't wave back. You are done with the rock. You are focused on the ship. You climb the rope ladder up the side of the tender. You haul yourself over the rail, and your boots hit the steel deck. Thud. It feels strange. The ship is moving, but it's a different kind of movement. It's a roll, not a sway. It feels heavy and industrial. You go below decks. The air here smells of coal smoke and grease, but to you it smells like perfume. It smells like going home. The ship blasts its whistle again. It turns its stern to the rock and begins to steam toward the mainland. The journey takes 3 hours. You sit in the crew mess, drinking tea that actually tastes like tea, not like stew tar. You eat a biscuit that you don't have to check for weevils. It's soft. It crumbles. It is the best thing you have ever tasted. As the coastline gets closer, you start to smell it. This brings us to a powerful sensory fact: the smell of land. Sailors know this well. Land has a smell. It smells of wet dirt, rotting leaves, grass, and animal manure. To a normal person, it might smell like a farm. To you, after 6 weeks of breathing nothing but salt spray, ozone, and paraffin, it smells thick and rich. It clogs your nose. It is the smell of biology, of chaos, of life. The ship docks at the pier. You throw your sea bag onto the cobblestones. You step off the gangplank, and you almost fall over. The ground rushes up to meet you. You stagger to the left. You correct and stagger to the right. You look like you are drunk, but you haven't touched a drop of alcohol in months. You are suffering from disembarkment sickness, or as the old keepers call it, the land waddle. Your inner ear has spent 6 weeks calibrating itself to the constant, rhythmic sway of the granite tower. It has learned to predict the movement. It pushes back against a sway that isn't there anymore. The solid ground feels dead. It feels hard. It jars your spine with every step because you are unconsciously waiting for it to dip. You walk down the street of the port town. It is a shock to the system. People everywhere. Women in long dresses. Men in suits. Horses pulling carts. Dogs barking. Children screaming. It is too loud. It is too colorful. You feel a sudden, overwhelming urge to retreat. You want to go back to the round room. You want the silence. This is the re-entry shock. You walk into a pub. You order a pint of ale. The barman asks you how you are. Fine, you say. You don't tell him about the mercury. You don't tell him about the fish on the balcony. You don't tell him about the waving corpse theory. He wouldn't understand. He is complaining about the rain. You just survived a Force 11 hurricane, and he is upset about a drizzle. You realize that you have changed. You have become a member of a secret society, the Society of the Edge Dwellers. You look at your hands. They are stained with oil and coal dust. They are callous from the winding crank. They are the hands of a machine. This leads to the final melancholy academic debate: automation and the loss of soul. In the late 20th century, all these lighthouses were automated. The keepers were withdrawn. The paraffin lamps were replaced by electric bulbs, then by LEDs. The clockwork was replaced by electric motors. The fog signals became automatic beepers. Engineers argue that this was a triumph of safety. No more mercury poisoning. No more isolation madness. No more men dying in storms. But historians and poets argue that we lost something. We lost the human eye. There was something profound about the fact that for centuries, the safety of the seas depended on a human being waking up every 45 minutes to wind a crank. It was a covenant between the keeper and the sailor. I will stay awake so you don't die. When the keepers left, the lights kept turning. But the covenant was broken. The light became cold. It became just a navigational aid, not a promise. You finish your pint. You walk out of the pub and look up at the hill. The sun is setting. And there on the horizon, you see it. Flash. The light. Your light. It is 20 miles away. A tiny star in the twilight. You know exactly how it feels. You know the new keeper is skimming the mercury. You know he is cursing the heat. You know he is winding the weight. You feel a phantom ache in your arm muscles. You instinctively check your pocket watch. It is lighting up time. You turn away and walk toward your home, your bed, and your corners. You are safe. You are on solid ground. But a part of you, the part that learned to breathe in rhythm with the swell, is still out there, standing on the gallery, watching the storm roll in. You have left the lighthouse, but the lighthouse will never really leave you. Now the shift is over. The logbook is closed. The brass is polished. You don't have to climb the stairs tonight. You don't have to fight the wind. You are back in a world that doesn't move. Lie back and feel the stillness of your room. The floor is solid. The walls are straight. There is no vibration, no shudder of stone against the waves. Imagine the sound of the ocean, but far away. Not the angry roar of the storm, but the gentle, rhythmic shushing waves on a distant beach. Shoo, shoo. It is a lullaby, not a threat. Think of the light we just left. It is still turning out there in the dark. A silent, spinning diamond. It is watching the ocean so you don't have to. It is cutting through the dark, keeping the ship safe, keeping the world orderly. You can let go of the vigilance. You don't need to watch the flame. You don't need to listen for the fog. Your eyelids are heavy, heavier than the lead weights of the clockwork. Let them close. Picture the beam of light sweeping slowly across the ceiling of the sky. Sweep and dark. Sweep and dark. It is a hypnotic rhythm. It slows down your breathing. In and out. The storm has passed. The sea is calm. The glass is clear. You are warm. You are safe. You are home. Drift away on the quiet tide.